We are now reconvened in open session. We will now consider action on closed session items. Mrs. James.
Ooh, I have a lot of stuff. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Board of Trustees approve Deanna Saavedra for the position of Deputy Superintendent.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice.
We have to vote.
Please vote by show of hand. Motion passes unanimously. Mrs. Taussand?
I move that the Board of Trustees approve Gwen Touche for the position of Chief Human Resources Officer.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Taussand and a second by Mr. Rice. Please vote by show of hand. Motion passes unanimously.
There was no discussion on these things.
I'm sorry. I was excited. All right, moving along. Next, we have our board governance. Mrs. James?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Burdine. I would like to just make a quick announcement. I was at the Gulf Coast Area Association of School Boards meeting last Wednesday. Mr. Morris was there as well. And Dr. Dupree was recognized as the Region 4 Superintendent of the Year, which we've announced. I picked up his hardware for him. I wanted to have my picture taken and everything, you know, cheese like Charles does, but it just wasn't happening. But I would like to say, and it was recognized at that event also, here, I'll pass this. This is actually yours. He was recognized that he is a finalist, as we've also mentioned in this boardroom, one of the top 5 finalists in the state of Texas, which is quite deserving and quite an honor for Region 4, which they were, which they acknowledged that evening. And I'd just like to mention that the awards for the Superintendent of the Year are on Saturday morning, so everybody needs to, you know, be excited about that, because I'm pretty sure, you know, we've got a pretty darn good candidate here, so I'm pretty excited about it. So anyway, I won't be there, but we're proud of you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. As the board of the policy committee, would you like to take the first item here?
Holy guacamole, I need to start drawing a salary for all this stuff. Yeah, so we are, the first item that for review tonight is FC Local, which so I just like to just give a little bit of an introduction about it, and then maybe Mrs. Martinez or Dr. Indelicato is going to say something next. But so this came up because the staff had worked really hard over the summer working on the procedures. And as you might recall, the board had approved an updated FC Local at last spring, right before beginning of summer or something like that. And we really, so we were happy about the new process for attendance boundaries and this policy sort of guiding that process. When we started reading through the procedures that I will say the staff worked really hard on, and they did a great job. They were very, very thorough. There was a lot of detail. It was really very well done. But when I realized that maybe some changes were needed, and there were some places in the policy that we hadn't done a very good job. So I talked to Mr. Rosenthal and Mrs. Drew, and we went back, because we're the trustee representatives on the policy committee. We actually talked to superintendent, we talked to staff, and we realized that there were some things that weren't very clear. One of the key things that came out is fully understanding the facilities planning cycle and making sure we had a good, clear understanding of what that looked like, and that in the policy as it had been written was sort of jumping all around. We also realized we wanted to put in kind of a public hearing type format to be sure we could get the community input. wasn't an options-based kind of thing, but it was real input on recommendations. And so that was sort of a change. Talking about then recommendations and how they evolved through the process, that was another addition that we made in this version over the last couple of weeks. Going from original recommendations, Allison's smiling because we went over this a few times, but original recommendations, going through the oversight process, making sure they aligned with policy, turning those into proposed recommendations that came to the board in a preliminary report that had the data. It had the recommendations, though, that were student-centered and the rationale behind why those recommendations were being made. And then going from the board to the community, back to the School Boundary Oversight Committee, and then finally into a set of final recommendations and a final report, again, that had rationale and the information behind it so that the board could make a good decision. So I think the changes, the refinements, the little things became kind of bigger as we dug into it. So you're going to see there's a lot of the red line version is pretty redlined, but don't be intimidated by that. It really, what happens is, as I said, defines the process a little bit better, make sure that the board sees the recommendations in a timely way, and then most importantly emphasize that there's a student-centered focus, that there's a district-wide look at the needs for the district, that the decisions and the recommendations are in the best interest of students, and that they're considering the unique needs of the students and the campuses involved. So really hopeful for the success of this policy, and I am happy to try to answer questions, but really the staff maybe is going to be better suited for that when it all comes down. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add to what I said, but thank you.
I don't have anything specific to add, just appreciation for the committee and their hard work and dedication to making sure that this is a tight policy and leads to a great process.
Thank you, Mrs. James and Mrs. Martinez. Mrs. Tossan, are you ready for some questions or good?
I think so.
Comments?
So I'm having a little bit of confusion about the marked up copy and the regular copy, so please pardon me if something's not there anymore. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna just read off of my notes that I made on my computer. So one question that I had was above vacancies, so it's under the membership and term section. It's on page 4 of 10 of the marked up copy. It says, and I may be reading this incorrectly, so I wanted some clarification. The last sentence of one of the paragraphs says, the administration shall include staff from the areas that could be impacted in an advisory role. And then the next sentence says, district employees shall not be eligible for membership. So, yeah, so do we mean district level employees like administration, or so it sounds contradictory to me, and maybe we need some clarification.
Thank you. So the intention is that staff members are not members of the School Boundary Oversight Committee, but those staff members that would have knowledge in particular areas, staff members at a particular school or at the district level, could be brought in for consultation and to advise throughout the process, but not as a member, to be considered as a member of the School Boundary Oversight Committee.
Okay, so we probably need to clarify that, because the heading is membership and term, and it specifically says the administration shall include staff from the areas that could be impacted. It doesn't say how to include them, and so the implication is that they're included as members. So if it's our intent not to include district employees, and I think that it was our intent to not include district employees as members, then we need to clarify.
So we can just clarify that they're there in an advisory role. They
capacity.
may be in attendance, but they're not actual members.
Correct. And I know we had this in there previously, that master plan communities are not considered neighborhoods. It's still there? Okay, because I looked through this and couldn't find it, so I just want to make sure it was still there, because that's, okay. Yeah, so I'm looking at the marked up copy now, I guess I should just ignore it. I just
It's
want to
on
make
page 7 of the not marked up copy.
Right, and that's what I
I'm not
have.
looking-
That's what I had here in front of me. So that's good. I think that that's important to have that in there, so that there's sometimes some confusion in the community about what a neighborhood is. So I think that's important. And then the last question, I had a few other suggestions, but they were minor. But my last question of substance is on page 8, under attendance boundary implementation, in the first bullet. So we state what our exceptions are about students who are rising 5th or 8th graders, that they are basically allowed to be grandfathered in. So they may remain at their current campus provided projected utilization for the school does not exceed 100% with those students remaining. So I just wanted us to think about that, because that's kind of it seems like a very bold line, where I'm not sure we intend to do that. So for example, if we have some students remaining and it's 100.5% or 101%, I don't want us to, I just want us to be careful not to put a very rigid line in policy where we might not intend for that to be so. And then we start taking 5th graders or 8th graders and shipping them off because we've now hit the 100% ceiling, and we're given no leeway to go over that, because, and the other board members can speak up about this, but in my opinion, I think definitely we have to watch the 100% mark, but if leaving those students there gets us to 101 or 102, or maybe even 105, I mean, I don't know, it depends on the school, I would be willing to allow those students to stay. And I don't want us to take a hard and fast position that the kids have to go out if it reaches 100%. So I just wanted to draw our attention to that. And maybe we could put some, if we're in agreement as a board, we could put some language that says, generally if we reach the 100%, mark, that's a guideline, but that there's some discretion to allow admin to maybe make that call or present it to the board for us to make that call, or however we want to word that.
Addie, did you have a comment about that?
Yeah, and I would agree with you, because I think what the 100%, what it does is allow, just temporarily, it's just a year, right? If you're doing a 5th or 8th grader, just a 1 year term. And also, then maybe I'm not clear, but how would you determine which students get to go, and which get to stay after you reach the 100%? 100% mark, even though I know this has been there for a while. This was part of the original policy. I'm not sure how it was implemented before, but just, I think moving forward, we want to make sure there's a little flexibility when it comes to grandfathering those students in.
And maybe what we do is we take that out and we say generally our policy is that these kids are grandfathered. And then we can maybe make a statement that if the school is already over 100 or would be over 100% utilized, or 105%, or whatever we would want to set there, then that either has to be brought to the board or for consideration, or admin can make a determination up to a certain level.
So I think what I hear you saying is that we want the grandfathering policy to exist for 5th and 8th graders as long as the school is not already at 100%.
Well, what I would say is I want it to exist. Me personally, and everybody can weigh in with what you think. I think I want it to exist regardless, unless it endangers students, unless we're so overutilized that it doesn't make sense for those kids to stay. So I guess those, and really that's usually on a case-by-case basis, right? It depends on the school, it depends on, how long have they been, and, we're gonna be giving them some relief, presumably, because other students will be moved out. And so it's just like you said, this 1 year of allowing those students to be grandfathered in. So that's what I was thinking, is that I would like to err on the side of allowing them to be grandfathered unless you present me a case where it's not in the best interest of the students, student safety is a concern, something along those lines.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossian. Mr. Rosenthal, do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I think we can maybe reword this a little bit. Maybe you leave that in there, and you add like or put it up to the discretion of administration. Again, focused on the student-centered guidelines. You know, if it's only 1% or something like that, and it's not gonna, kids aren't sitting on floors, or kids don't have access to fine arts and whatnot, and counseling, then you move them. So I think it could be more of a case by case rather than a hardline number. But yeah, I think you could leave that in there, or you can add maybe something like, we'll wordsmith it, or up to the. Yeah, we've been doing it for the last 2 weeks. Yes.
I'd like to respond to that, because what I would prefer is that you just take it out completely. Because we all agree it's in the best interest of children to remain for 5th and 8th grade if they've done that feeder pattern. And I think it's just, because anything you do that gives discretion voids the whole section, really. Because it just makes it so wide open that what is the real answer, and then parents will say, well, you can leave them. See, it says you can leave them. And so I would rather say that they're just going to stay, and if we ever believe we're in a position where they should not stay, then we ask the board to say, in this unique circumstances, we think this is what we need to do. That would be my preference, so it's very clear to the community as they see us and as we move forward.
So that would need to be part of your recommendation probably then.
Yes, we would make the recommendation.
So when you make a recommendation, you would say, in this case, we believe that we need to move fifth graders or 8th graders or whatever.
Yes, and I think
school we're doing.
Madden was a good example of this. This year when we opened Malala, Madden was a situation where they were still going to be excessively overcrowded even after we opened that new school. So we enforced this year at Madden. We did not let the 5th graders stay. However, and so if this were not in policy, we might have come forth with a recommendation that said, under the circumstances, there's still going to be 110, 115%. Therefore, we recommend that the board not allow the 5th graders to stay this year. But most of the other schools we open, they dip down into the 70s and 80s, and it's easy to let all of them stay.
Right.
So that would be my recommendation.
All right, so if we take that phrase, provided projected utilization for the school does not exceed 100%, take that phrase out, then I think it meets the intent.
Thank you very much. Are we good?
I still have a comment too.
Go ahead, Mr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, one of the other things we made sure that we clarified once all the procedures were written was that we needed to make sure that the duties and the objectives of the SBOC were clear. There was no question as to what the relationship was between the SBOC staff and the board. And I think, the district has gotten itself into trouble in the past. I was bringing up the Buck Committee from, what was that, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that. So we don't want to get into that kind of situation. So I think, again, once we were able to do that, once we kind of saw your procedures in writing, it started to think, hey, you know what, this isn't really clear. We didn't make sure, like the word you used, tighten it up. So anyway, that was my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Ms. James?
Yeah, there's one other thing I think we need to change in here from the version that's in front of you, and that is in the membership and terms section, which is on page 3 of 8, or whatever. It's just below, the paragraph just below that Kristen was talking about before. We put in a 1.5 or 2.5 year term for the inaugural committee members. But I'd like to suggest that we take that sentence out, and that when we actually approve the inaugural committee, we do as part of that motion the length of the inaugural term. Because generally, the terms are gonna be 2 years, and we're gonna stagger them, so that in the procedures, it talks about some are gonna be 1 year and some are gonna be 2 year for the first group. But there's gonna be some extra months in there this first round, so I'm just asking staff if we can take that sentence out and then put that in the motion for when the committee comes to
Yes,
us.
we can do that.
Do you want to say why? Because I think it makes a lot of sense. Why we're gonna, no, you explain it.
Golly gee. So, when we went back and looked at the planning cycle actually starts February 1st, because it's in February that the annual enrollment review comes to the board, and then that informs updating the facilities master plan, which comes around to updating, making any attendance boundary updates. So, and then those attendance boundaries come to the board in December, January at the latest, and that ends the cycle, and then the cycle would start again with a new annual enrollment review. So that's why the term, we shifted the term to February 1st to January 31st year, rather than the July 1st that was in the previous version. So that's the story behind the story.
All right. Thank you all very much for all your hard work on this. This is a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work, and it's a big rock, so to speak. So thank you very much to the committee for working on this, and staff. I know there's a lot of hours that went into it, so thank you. Moving along to 6A2, review approval of the 2019 tax year tax roll.
Good evening, Mr. President. We have several items for you this evening related to the tax rate, tax roll, and property taxes. The first one is a procedural item. Each year when the district receives this certified tax roll from the county appraisal district, it does require approval by the Board of Trustees in order to put that in place so that the tax assessor can collect against that tax roll. That is the item that we have here that's first this evening. I don't know if there are any specific questions around the ratification or approval of this particular item. The next item that we have is going to be related to the adoption of the tax rate, and for that, we do have a very brief presentation I'd like to go through with you to give you a little bit of background on this.
We're referring to 6A3 now, correct?
Sorry,
Review the
Mr.
adoption of the 2019 ad valorem tax rate. Correct, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I superseded your authority.
No,
I
it's okay.
apologize for that.
I just wanted to make, no, I just want to make sure that we were all on the same line.
This was not an attempt at a coup, I assure you. But my clicker is not working, so do you mind? I'll motion for you. So to remind you all, there are two components to the tax rate, the maintenance and operation, or M&O portion, and the income and sinking, or INS. The M&O rate supports district operations, so the general fund and all the salaries, benefits, as well as the operations that are associated with that. The INS rate is used to pay down district debt for bond projects authorized by voters, and both of those are adopted by the Board of Trustees on an annual basis. Next slide, please. So the impact of House Bill 3 on the tax rate, you all may recall that there was a compression component associated with the tax rate in House Bill 3. It does compress the tax rate by 93% on the Tier 1 tax rate. The result of that is a compression of the Fort Bend ISD M&O rate of 7 cents, and that reduction in the M&O rate is being offset by an increase in state funding. Now, I'm adding this as an editorial comment. That is an area of concern because, as you all are aware, they did not fund this with recurring revenue. So for this biennium, we are assured that that would be made up for the next 2 years. The compression does not apply to the INS rate. So when you look at this, this is only applicable to specifically to the M&O rate. Next slide. Again, the 2019 bond referendum, $992.6 million was authorized by the voters. Included in that was a 3-cent increase to the INS tax rate. The proposed tax rate does include a 2-cent increase to the INS rate to support debt payments that are part of that bond issuance. To date, the district has issued $104.1 million of that $992 million, and there's $130 million planned for late spring that would be added to that total amount. For the 1920 adopted budget, the board approved a budget of just under $717 million. That's going to be supported by a tax rate of 99 cents. And on the debt service side, we have a total debt budget of $104.9 million. That's supported by a 28-cent tax rate, so the total district tax rate would be $1.27 if approved by the board. Just as a reminder, from a history standpoint, you can see over the last several years we've maintained a tax rate anywhere between $1.34 and $1.32. There was an intentional swap and drop, if you will, back in 17-18 that resulted in a 2-cent tax rate reduction. This does take us back to the tax rate equivalent of 2008-2009. So it is a drop in the tax rate. And just for historical perspective, back in 2005 and 6, that was when the legislature did the initial work to reduce the tax burden. So that's why you see that drop in that particular year over a 3-year period. So the impact to the average taxpayer in the district with an average taxable value of $260,226, that represents about a 2.25% increase over the prior year in taxable value. However, because of the 7-cent compression in the tax rate combined with the 2-cent increase that we're doing, the overall tax rate is going down by 5 cents. That results in a tax bill of $3,300, which is a 1.62% decrease from the prior year, or about $55 a month for an average taxpayer within the district. To give you an idea of where we're looking in the future, we are in the process of developing a 3-year pro forma that will show the impact of House Bill 3. We anticipate having that completed by December so that we would be able to share with the board what things look like. As you're aware, there is an additional golden penny included as part of House Bill 3 that's available as a local option for the board to adopt. Would evaluate the need for that, as well as any potential need for a future tax ratification election that we've discussed with you in the past. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Any questions? Thank you for the presentation. Oh, go ahead.
You didn't have any new words for us today?
Well, I'm not quite finished yet, but
Okay.
no, it was just that. Well, actually, I guess coup d'état was but that's more, I think, French than anything. But I'm a polyglot. What can I say?
All right. Are we moving on to the next 6A4 here?
This item is specifically related to the consideration or the uncollectible property tax accounts. Again, this is a procedural item. Each year, the district has taxes that are not collectible. Typically, these are older items where there's either a bankruptcy proceeding, a death, or some case like that. We have to have board approval in order to write off those amounts. I don't know if there are any specific questions, but we do have Mr. Mike Swikert from Purdue Brandon, our delinquent attorney, if you all have any specific questions related to this item.
Mrs. Tossan?
I just noticed that a lot of what's listed in here are businesses. And so you said they're either bankruptcies or deaths. And I know some of these businesses are still there. So I'm just curious. Maybe that's just curious.
I had the same question. There's a few that,
Hey, Mike.
yeah.
Yes, I mean, I just, I read through them.
I was going to say.
I just was, it was curious to me that lots of the ones listed are businesses, and they are businesses that I pass.
They may
sometimes.
have the same name, but they have different owners, probably, more than likely. A lot of these aren't bankruptcies. These are businesses that have sold the business to a new owner that is not personally responsible for the taxes, and they're beyond the statute of limitations to collect, which is a 4-year statute. So we can't collect, even go out there to talk to them if they're barred by statute, which is 4 years. After 4 years, though, we get to the 10-year statute, and that is a write-off statute. So from 4 to 10, there's not much anyone could do.
Okay.
But a lot of these businesses do carry the same names. They're probably different owners, is what
So
I'm
that makes
thinking.
sense. Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You got to answer a question. You came
Thank
here for a
you.
purpose tonight.
I never get to talk now
Thank
that I
you
got
for
the
being-
mic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swerka. All right. Moving right along to 6A5.
Yes.
Dr. Dupree, do you want to make a comment about that?
Yes, sir. I need to provide some clarity around this item. We received a miscommunication from the appraisal district on this. And actually, we're going to replace this item. The intent at this point is for the board to nominate their candidates, not to actually allocate votes. So we previously have nominated Jim Key and Al Abramczyk. And they are both still willing to serve if the board wants to nominate them again as our two candidates. So we will rewrite this item with the recommendation, if you propose, that these two individuals are the district nominees for your approval next week.
Yes, I'd say that's fine. They're the ones who've been serving, right?
Yes.
Go ahead, Eddie.
I have a question. How do we get these names, just from a clarification of process? How do we get these names?
Well, that's a good question. Both of these individuals have been the district's representatives for quite a while, from what I can recall.
Mr. Rice, do you have any knowledge of how this has worked in the past?
Well, individuals run for election, and we have so many votes. Jim Key has been serving as the president for a while. I believe Glenn Whitehead is getting ready to retire. They'll be bringing someone new on. I think it's important to have people that have been there and know the ropes to continue that at least until the new appraiser gets hired. And
Just from a process, I'm asking from a process perspective. So, can anyone serve on these boards, or is it someone from a particular grouping? Just for clarification.
well, I think anyone can serve.
Okay.
I do think there are particular organizations that place candidates forward who are willing to run and who they support. And yeah, typically we have so many votes, and we've split them among the two in the past that have represented us. And so I would assume that anyone who desired to serve could solicit from us a nomination.
Yeah, and I do remember us doing this. I just want to make sure I reminded
Yeah.
myself and the community of how these names come about.
Well, and on that note, each of the taxing entities nominates candidates, and then each of the taxing entities allocates their votes. So and generally that does happen where individuals are interested, and they'll let board members know. So the board can put forth any names they choose to put forth.
Okay, so next week you're going to come back with this corrected and,
That's right, with those two names.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to 6A6, review of previous meeting minutes. First being August 5th, 2019, a special called meeting for the board team building. All good. We're all good for August 12th and August 26th as well. Thank you very much. Great job, Ms. Rozier. Now moving to 6B1, review exception for our class size waivers.
Will be presented next week.
Okay. All right, that'll be presented next week. 6C1, review the purchase exceeding $50,000 First being the review the expenditure authorization increase for the PSAT NMSQ Early Participation Program. Any questions or comments? Mr. Rosenthal? All right. Moving along to 6D1, review the credit union lease agreement. All right. 6D2, review agreement with the Baker Ripley for the district's early Head Start and Head Start programs. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes, so Charles and I talked about this today over the phone, and one, I didn't see any costs associated with this on the agenda item. Maybe I'm just overlooking it, or is there a cost to the district on this?
As far as the cost, there's no cost to us as a school district. We actually receive funding a little bit over $40,000 from Baker Ripley.
So they're paying us.
Yes, sir.
So how are they receiving like federal funding or something like that?
I would assume that it's federal funding, but they do receive funding, but they utilize our facilities, so that's where they're able to pay us as
Okay, so
a
they-
district.
And they use, and they've been doing this for a while, I know, so.
Yes, sir.
They utilize our facilities with our students, I assume.
Yes, sir. We do have, so we have them in 4 areas. We have them at Mission Bend Elementary. We have them at Hunters Glen, at the educational complex, and of course at the new ELC that we have. So we have a partnership with them. At 2 of the locations, they actually provide their own staff to teach alongside with our teachers.
Okay, so that was part of my question is how, now that the district is paying for full-day pre-K, how does this program and our pre-K program overlap, or does it?
Yeah, so with the pre-K program, we are responsible for the pre-K program. Now they have what we call early Head Start. So that is for children that are 6 weeks or babies that are 6 weeks all the way to 3 years of age. So they provide support services with that age group, with the early Head Start. In addition, they do provide support at the ELC and at Hunters Glen. Going back to what I said earlier, we have a collaboration with them where there's one of their teachers and one of our teachers in the classroom.
Okay, so before we instituted our full-day pre-K, we've had Head Start in the district for a while. Have we ever actually tracked those students as they go through the district?
We do have data from the circle assessment, and the data shows that our students are receiving a benefit from having or from participating in the Baker Ripley partnership.
Okay, is there a way we can at some point, just see that? I mean, we're not paying for it directly, but,
Yes, sir. I
Probably
can
ought
get
to
that data for you.
okay. It'd just be nice to make sure that, we're seeing, progress.
Absolutely. I'll get that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Moving to 6D4, review use of the Smart Financial Center as a venue for the 2019-20 commencement ceremonies. I'm sorry. 6D3, review memorandum of understanding for the Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program. Do we have any questions or comments? Mr. Rosenthal.
Okay, so, Charles, we talked about this today as well. And you were saying that this is actually a separate facility, correct? Could you-
Yes, Joe, do you wanna?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, and it's down 521 area?
Yes, sir, by Rosharon.
Okay. So I was just looking through this, and it seems like 90-some%, I think of 58 students, 56 were from Fort Bend ISD. And we have a sharing agreement with A-Leaf and
Stafford.
Okay? So being that that's at the edge of the district and pretty far from A-Leaf, it's not really a surprise, I guess, that, maybe we're not receiving a lot of kids from there. So the cost is basically being almost 100% on us.
Yes, sir.
So is there a way, are there other places that this could be relocated? Is this up to the county? Is it a partnership? where maybe we can draw in more students so we're not, paying the burden of this program?
Yes, so this is a part of the county. So the county, we have an agreement with the county. Obviously, we wanna have less students from Fort Bend ISD.
Sure.
Go to JJAP, but considering the size of our school district, when you consider it against Stafford and of course A-Leaf, and you consider the distance from A-Leaf to our facility, there is gonna be a difference when you look at the numbers.
Right. And so that's what I'm saying. If we're going to be paying, this amount of money, because it looks like it's kind of a fixed cost, maybe, then it'd be good to make that facility more accessible to other districts so they could help at least share in the cost if they have kids that they're going to send. If they don't have kids that they're going to send, then that's different.
Yeah.
I do have a question that,
Yes.
but isn't there 2 sites? Isn't there another site in Richmond? We have two locations?
No, just
Just the
one.
one? Just the one? Okay, because I did go out and visit there, and the site also has, I think, some county youth facilities as well there. So it's like two or three different programs going on at that particular site. So I don't know if we move our location, how, what does it impact, the county's the county's piece of it as well.
It'd be good to look into this for the
The
future,
share.
since,
Sure.
it is $400,000, and, if we can get other districts, if they have students that need to be there anyway, at least they help share the cost, so.
Yes, and I do want to add that whenever the court systems expel students, there's no cost to us. The cost that we incur as a school district is when we, through the discretionary process, when we send students as a school district to the JJAP facility.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Now moving on to 6D4, review the use of the Smart Financial Center as a venue for the 2019-20 commencement ceremonies. Any questions? All right. 6D5, review the interlocal agreement between Fort Bend ISD, Fort Bend County, and the Fort Bend County Juvenile Board regarding the Saved by the Bell truancy program. Mrs. James.
So I asked a couple of questions about this during the week, but I guess what I'd be interested in knowing is how have the attendance rates of the students that have been served in this program changed? There was some data given about how many visits or things like that, and that's how but I just wonder if it's effective in getting kids to attend school. So that's what I was kind of going for. Do we have information about that?
Yeah, so the attendance for students that are in Tier 2 and Tier 3.
I don't know what that means.
Okay, so let me explain. So Tier 1 students are those that have absences that range from 5 to 9. Tier 2 are those that are from 10 to 19. Tier 3 is going to be 20 absences or above. So the focus of this program are students that are in Tier 2 and Tier 3. So when we look at those students, attendance has increased and the truancy rates has actually decreased. But I can provide that information to you and get a little bit more specific. But everything that we're seeing is it's trending up where you want to see it trend up, and it's trending down where you want to see it trend down.
That's great. So I would like to see some numbers. So if you can, I think you mentioned something about how many students were served, but I was wondering about what their attendance, maybe for the following year or the following semester or something like that. If you could give that information, that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Good, Ms. Rosenthal.
Yeah, I have similar question. I think the last time we've actually seen a presentation on the truancy numbers is when Christy Whitbeck was here. I don't think we've had any updates since that. So I would really like to see what our numbers look like over the past 4 or 5 years since things have changed, law and our policy. And I would like to, again, this is something, I've supported this in the past, but, money's tight. We need to start making sure that, again, the programs are actually making sense and they're actually doing good, not just making us feel good.
Mr. Rosenthal, what I would remind the board of on this one in particular is I think this stands true, is this is a much larger scale program that we're basically paying a fraction of the cost. I think, if I remember,
I think we split it with the county.
yeah, well, but I think if I remember, to get these same resources to actually serve students, it would cost us almost double this amount. So
No, I
that's-
know, it was.
That's the reason we advanced
Right,
it.
no, it was, I mean, I remember the discussion, you know,
Good.
with Mr. Commissioner Patterson and whatnot, and, you know, it made sense at the time, but still, it's a program, and we always say we wanna evaluate programs to make sure they're successful, so I think this falls under that, so we need to see the numbers and, you know.
Yeah, and I think another relative statistic on this student population is the dropout rate. And what's the dropout rate of these students, and are we is this preventing the kids dropping out?
Thank you both. I think that'd be some good information to know as well. Moving along to 6DCA, review expenditure authorization increase for the Communities and Schools program. Mr. Rosenthal.
So, I actually went on their website a little bit today, just to make sure I kinda understood, and it looks like a good program. And I know you talked about, the funding that we provided last month, for, mental health under the grant. I forget the name of the grant now. But is there overlap, at least on the mental health aspect, because that's a lot of what these guys do? Yeah, maybe different tiers, but is there overlap? How do they, are these folks working together with the increased staff that we just approved last month? How does it all work? I just want to see efficiency, you know, I don't, you know, programs and programs and programs.
Right, so there is a level of consistency and overlap. Obviously, they're a different organization, but they do provide mental health and wraparound services. And the partnership will serve to allow us to distribute more services across the district. We anticipate to hear that we're hopeful that we'll be awarded the VOCA grant. So before October 1st, we should hear whether we've been awarded. If we should be awarded, then we'll have a good portion of the east side of the district covered in terms of where the highest needs are. This will allow us to begin to provide wraparound services specifically associated with mental health strategically in the central or west side of the district, where we've got some tier 1 and some tier 2 services, but this would really help us leverage additional mental health services. And there is a level of consistency and partnership with them and the services that you approved in the previous board meeting.
So do we have somebody that actually coordinates with these folks and with our own staff that we just approved?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, we have so our in-service, Steve Shields is our Director of Behavioral Health, so he'll be working with our vendors that we've secured via our RFP, should we receive the VOCA grant, and then his team will also be coordinating with communities and schools to make sure that we have alignment and consistency in terms of what we want to see addressed based on our mental health needs for our students.
I just want to make sure that we're being efficient, you know. So
But I would add, because I like the way you said that, Mr. Rosenthal, programs on programs, because I understand sometimes when things come to the board piecemeal, it feels like we're just throwing a lot of different things. But I think the key is, and Deanna, I think, said it well, is sometimes what we're trying to do is build a large program from multiple pieces. Because one organization will do this, another organization will do this, and sometimes there is direct overlap. But in the end, we got 77,000 kids we're trying to serve. So any resource, any money, any partnership to provide that, we're going to bring to the board. But I think probably the learning for us is we need to figure out a way to make sure the board is very aware of how these integrated pieces fit together and how they're not redundant but complementary in the work that we're trying to do.
yeah, I mean, and you just made me think of something. So, is it more efficient for us to hire our own staff, you know, under those grants, or just pay for them outright, or to go through the communities and school type organizations or whatnot? I mean, I think that's really important. I think we need to know that, because it's, you know, we don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of all these programs that we're adding, and I think, you know, there needs to be some kind of evaluation, so we know that we're being efficient.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Rosenthal. Moving along to 6D, 6B, review agreement with Missouri City Funeral Directors at Glen Park for services and related goods used for the reinterment of human remains. Do we have any questions or comments? Moving along, 6E1A, review the purchase of Chick-fil-A items. Sounds good.
Ellen will approve it
Right.
if they bring us samples.
Nuggets.
Okay, we'll go.
Go ahead, Ms. James.
So this relates to the next item as well. I don't know what, I'm in favor of this, and I think that's good, but I don't know what impact this will have on fundraising events, because I know some booster clubs rely on sandwich sales and things like that. Is that the pizza?
I don't know if you've had the chance to meet Matt Antignolo, our new child nutrition director, but I'll ask him to speak to that.
Yes, good evening. So currently the plan is with Chick-fil-A at the 2 high schools that are doing mega lunch. The Gibson audit has mentioned meals per labor hour and participation, so we're hoping with the addition of these items that we could to tackle both of those problems by increasing participation, by offering other items, and also not necessarily needing additional staff because they're going to be grab-and-go type items. Now, we are already offering the Domino's Pizza as a reimbursable meal daily at the high schools. We offer cheese, pepperoni, and sausage, and have talked with principals prior to this, and everybody was okay with it. This actually started before I began in June last year with Ann and Steve prior to me getting here. The Chick-fil-A is new. I'm not a, you know, I have mixed feelings on it. I've done it before in the past. Personally, I would rather sell my own chicken sandwich that has a larger profit margin, to be honest. But the customers love Chick-fil-A. As a parent, I love Chick-fil-A, but as a business person, I think it's better and makes more sense to do it ourselves. Now, the district I came from, we were selling it once a week at high schools as a special day, and we couldn't bring in enough of it. So we've talked with Kempner and Clements already. They're both in agreement to do it at the mega lunch campuses, and then the hope would be to work with the other principals to do it once a week, kind of like I was doing in my previous district as a special day. Obviously not stepping on toes with fundraising and that sort of thing. Now, these items are chicken sliders. They're not the traditional sandwich that you would get in the drive-through line. So they are Smart Snack approved to be able to be sold at schools during the school day. So my understanding is most fundraisers would do the full-size true sandwich. That's probably more of a profitable item for them.
Mrs. Haley, do you have a question or comment?
I do not want to see Twitter tweets about Fort Bend ISD chicken versus Chick-fil-A chicken versus Popeye's chicken. I just couldn't resist when he said he wanted to do his own chicken. So sorry. I digress.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Mrs. James, was that? Okay. All right. 6E1B, review the purchase of Domino's pizza items. We just covered that. 6E1C, review the expenditure authorization increase for lawn maintenance and landscaping services. All right. 6E1D, review expenditure authorization increase for voice services. Mr. Rosenthal.
Okay, so I'm a little confused as to why there is such a huge jump in the contract. I know when I was reading through this, it said the initial contract, there was a mistake or something like that made in the initial contract. Could somebody just explain this?
I'm sorry, which one are we on?
The wind
I'll
stream,
let
because it's
George
a huge jump. It's an increase of over $1 million.
So the initial contract was for 3 years plus 2 additional years, individual years, so to make 5 years total. But the calculation we brought was only covering for the 3 years. So the bill, the annual bill is roughly $500,000 annually for the phone. To cover the 2 years, it's about $1 million for the 2 years.
So to clarify, the error was we brought you a 5-year contract with a 3-year expenditure.
3 years spent, okay.
So we did not miss on the number, we just didn't bring you the complete number
Okay.
when you previously approved it.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's no actual increase,
All
just to
right, so
clarify.
we're looking-
In our annual,
Well, yes, the board,
Yes.
because we can't expend, we need the board to approve the expenditure for the remaining 2 years of the contract.
I understand, but we didn't have $1 million increase.
No.
For what, okay,
No.
I just wanted to clarify.
There's no
Yes.
increase to the annual amount.
Same,
Got
we
it.
just didn't bring the full amount.
Got it.
That's why I wanted
Got
to
it.
It's the same amount of voice services that we've been having for
Got
the
it.
past years.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for the clarification. Moving on to 6E1E, review expenditure authorization increase for uninterruptible power supply equipment. All right. 6E1F, review extension of the current alternative transportation services agreement with American Logistics Company. 6E2A, review construction service agreement with CS Advantage USAA Incorporated for roofing replacement at multiple campuses in the Central Zone. 6E2B, review construction services agreement with ICI Construction Incorporated for restroom renovations at multiple campuses. 6E2C, review construction services agreement with Prime Contractors Incorporated for the HVAC MEP renovations at multiple campuses. 6E2D, review construction services agreement with Bass Construction for the HVAC MEP renovations at multiple campuses. 6E2E, review schematic design for the new middle school 16. We'll have a
Thank you.
presentation.
So we're
Go
going
ahead,
to have
sir.
a quick presentation, and we have AJ. Where did okay, it disappeared on me. With Corrigan, that will go ahead and go through this presentation on our net zero design for middle school 16.
Thank you, everyone. Dr. Dupree, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm here to present tonight middle school number 16. What's special about this school is it will be a net zero design. And what that means is this building will produce as much energy as it consumes. So how we're going to do that is, well, starting off with the site, let's get oriented where we're at. This is where the site is going to be proposed. The orange block that you see here in this development is our site. To the north, we've got Highway 6. To the south, we've got McKeever. To give this context to the board, Hightower High School is directly to the north, adjacent to that residential property you see there. So how we're going to achieve net zero is by using renewable energy resources and an enhanced building envelope that will reduce the heating and cooling load on this building. So geothermal, we're going to be putting approximately 830 geothermal wells on this site. They're going to go on fields and under parking. Insulated concrete form. This is a beefed up building envelope that has a very high insulation value, an R value of 30 or over. This will reduce, like I said, the heating and cooling load that we have on the building, allowing us to optimize the systems and achieve net zero design. And solar, we'll have approximately about 90,000 square feet on the roof and on canopies of solar panels. This will produce just under a megawatt of energy. The energy will be converted on site and then sent to the power company, which will then give us the credit for the power we're producing on site. So here's the site. Taking a look at the building, you see the north arrow there. We've oriented this building along the east-west axis to mitigate heat gain and heat loss. Looking at the parking, down south, we have the parking loop. Thank you. Which one is it? So we have the parking loop for the parents. Parent and drop-off is down here. They'll loop around, queue up,